Oh, okay. Honorable Commissioners, Senior Counsel Mugor, good morning. We are now ready to start our session this morning. Senior Counsel Philip Mugor, welcome to this interview. We hope that it will be more of a conversation with you, between you and the commissioners. And please relax and answer the questions as precisely as you can, Senior Counsel. So the interviews will be by all the commissioners. And as soon as those pictures are taken, we are going to introduce ourselves. So just 1 minute and then we introduce ourselves. I think that is enough. So Senior Counsel, we introduce ourselves. My name is Professor Philip Mugor, chairing these interviews. I am a commissioner representing the public. And on my right,
good morning, Senior Counsel. I am Philomena Mbetemwilo, the elected representative to the Judicial Service Commission by the Supreme Court of Kenya, and I am the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya.
Good morning, Council. I'm Pati Keshohi, representing Public Service. Karibu.
Good morning, Senior Counsel. My name is David Majanja, Judge of the High Court and a male representative for the Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association.
Good morning, Senior Counsel. I'm Oluwande Evelyn, a Chief Magistrate. I'm representing the female representative, KMJ as the female representative.
Good morning, Senior Counsel. My name is Machere Njero. I represent Law Society of Kenya, you being one of them, at the Commission.
Good morning, Senior Counsel. My name is Felix Koske. I represent the public.
Good morning, Senior Counsel. My name is Mohamed Warsame, Judge of Appeal. Welcome.
Thank you.
A very good morning, Senior Counsel. Kehara Kariuki. I am the Attorney General, and I'm on this panel by virtue of my being in that office.
Thank you very much, Senior Counsel. If you are not sure about a question, you are free to ask the commissioners to clarify or to repeat the question. And I'll start by asking you to tell us your county, Senior Counsel, and your ethnicity. As you know, we are required by the Constitution to take care of diversity.
First of all, allow me to record my appreciation at being here this morning before this esteemed panel of JSC commissioners. My county, I have 2 counties. Actually, I have 3 counties. I was born in Elgeyo Marakwet, the place where all the champions in the country come from, so I hope not to let them down today. My parents settled in Uasin Gishu County. That is where I have my country home. But the larger part of my life, up to the present days, I live in Nairobi County. But having said so, that be on the question of counties, I'll go to the question of my ethnic background. I am a Kalenjin. You mentioned that you are expected to take care of diversity. A Kalenjin happens to be the community that is not represented on the Supreme Court. So I make that also clear. And the third question, your Madam Chair, was?
I think that is it, but okay. We need one county. Which is the county in your ID?
My ID, it would be Uasin Gishu.
Washing Gishu. Do we go by that?
I think we'll go by that.
Okay. Thank you very much. So tell us, Senior Counsel, who is Philip Mugor in terms of the person, the lawyer, and the leader that you want to be?
I would be, I think, remiss in going straight to the lawyer that is Philip Mugor or the senior counsel that is Philip Mugor. I would have to start with who I am as a person. First of all, I'm a husband to a judge of the Court of Appeal in this judiciary, Justice Agnes Mugor. I am a father of 3 young adults, 2 girls and 1 young man. I am everything else to my entire family. But this gentleman, Philip Mugor, was born in 1961 in Elgeyo Marakwet County. He grew up there. He was born there. And at that time, my parents or my father was in the provincial administration. And that required that he travel. At that point in time, he was in the town of Iten. I then grew up in another town, Kiambu town. I grew up in Kisumu a little later, and by 1970, the family relocated to Eldoret in Washing Gishu County. I stayed in that, I grew up there until I finished my primary school. I moved to Nairobi for my secondary school and my university, and I have not left Nairobi since. So the person you see, insofar as outlook or worldview is concerned, is a person who is easily described as a Kenyan. A Kenyan that does not see anyone, any person from an ethnic lens. Philip Mugor, the person you see here, went to school in national schools. And I will take you straight to my secondary school and my university. I went to University of Nairobi, and I finished my law degree there in 1985. I went back in 2011, or a bit earlier, and finished my master's in 2011. I got my master's degree from University of Nairobi. I have several other qualifications, but I will discuss that perhaps in another question. Apart from that, I would like to say that as a child, I grew up in a polygamous home where there were 4 ladies privileged to call themselves wives, many children. Throughout the span of that polygamous family, both of my parents have passed on, but eventually there were 18 children. Why I say this and why it is relevant is in that competitive atmosphere of a polygamous home, for those of you who might have experienced the same, it doesn't always work perfectly, and it becomes a competition for attention, for care, for everything. This type of atmosphere brought me in very close contact with my own mother. And my mother, who has passed on, was very close to me. She is the person that made me what I am today. She taught me the virtues of fairness, kindness, compassion, and I salute her today. I'm here because of my mother. She worked hardest to bring me to where I am today, and I'm grateful. So that is Philip Mugor. For that reason, I will tell you this, and I am not apologetic at all. I am an avowed gender equalist. I believe in the equality of women with men. I believe in the equality of girls to their fellow kin, the boy child. And it brings me, and it will perhaps bring me in this same conversation into certain explanations that I will give why I may not attract the sympathies of those who are male chauvinists or those who feel the woman is a lesser person in this country or the girl is a lesser child. So that is Philip Mugor.
Yes, the next one, the next part of the question was Philip Mugor as a lawyer.
Philip Mugor as a lawyer, first of all, I would address the misconception about Philip Mugor as a quick one. Philip Mugor is a very soft-hearted, understanding, gentle when he needs to be kind of person. And I'm talking about him as a lawyer. But to bring you to the point where I'll ask you to come to that conclusion, I will go first to, at the University of Nairobi in 1982 when I joined. One morning in the month of August, I got caught up in the famous or the infamous abortive coup. I was a first-year student. There were tensions in the country, and somehow, somewhere, I found myself in a situation where, after the events had subsided, a few weeks later, I was arrested. I was arrested with a group of about 60 students who, for one reason or other, were found to somehow have participated in a demonstration that came under the grouping called sedition at the time. We were charged with quite a few people. And you know, whenever people talk about 1982, you all recall that the former Chief Justice Mutunga also got caught up in the period and was incarcerated. And we have one or two other notables. But having said that, what is the relevance to Philip Mugor as a lawyer? The relevance is that for 6 months after the arrest, apart from spending a few nights in the cells, both in Eldoret and at Central, we came to this building, which is the Supreme Court building today, for mentions every 2 weeks. There was a requirement for mentions every 2 weeks. And spent the whole day in the cells, which are now the very beautiful rooms that comprise the museum. At that point, they were not as beautiful. They were extremely badly kept. They were smelly. And it was, and this is relevant because I'm talking about what the judiciary was at the time, the cells were kept in a manner that would prevent you from getting too used to being in trouble. They were meant to punish you from the time you were charged. Having said that, it took about 6 months for the Office of the Attorney General then to find out that there was no evidence to prosecute the charges. And one day, as surprising as we were charged, one day we woke up and came to court and the charges were withdrawn. Several individuals against whom there was some evidence went on to be prosecuted and even convicted. Philip Mugor, as a lawyer, has been shaped by those events. It has made me a person who reflects very hard when he deals with issues relating to law and justice. When anyone complains about being a victim of the police, of the prosecution, of the judicial system, I listen very carefully because I know it is possible. I know it happens. I cannot ascribe the events of 1982 to corruption. I would ascribe it to politics. But today, victims of the justice system are they mainly come through other processes, including corruption in the investigation process, the prosecution process, and sometimes in the judicial process. The other event that, so anyway, I finally got released and went back to school. The universities had been closed for the full period that we're incarcerated, so we lost no time. We went on to finally graduate in the next 2 or 3 years. And another aspect of this becomes relevant. I consider myself above average as a law student. And why I say this, I don't consider myself brilliant. I know who were brilliant in my class. They went on to be professors and all the rest of it. But why I mention this is I had choices after I finished my university degree. I did my pupillage in the top law firms. And I should mention, one of my pupil masters was the Honorable, the Attorney General, Commissioner Kehara Kariuki. I was at Hamilton, Harrison and Matthews. And I can say that at that time, you might not know it now, but those who were in school at that time, there was a general classification as to who joined the private sector, remained in the private sector, who joined the state law office, who joined the judiciary. Those who thought they were most articulate as advocates went straight into the private sector to earn the money. Those who were less endowed with speaking skills or advocacy might have joined the state law office. Those who didn't know how to communicate but were otherwise good at their books joined the judiciary. But generally, the classification was that those who joined the public service were those who didn't have choices. I must say the transformation that has been made in the judiciary has completely changed that. Today, the best students want to join the judiciary. The best students want to join the state law office and all the rest of it. But I mention this in my context. And what is my context? As I finished my pupillage, I had the choice of remaining in the private sector. I had offers from good law firms, one of which was the one I had done pupillage with. But I chose public service. I said that is where you get your proper grounding as a citizen. You should go in and serve the public. I joined the public service. I went for my interview at the state law office. I was very easily taken, and another important event took place after that. At that time, people joined the state law office for as short a time as it took to get another job. And if the Attorney General or his staff made the mistake of transferring you, you simply downed your tools and left. So I was called into a meeting by the then Solicitor General and said, we can't quite believe that you really want to work for the government, but you seem to be keen. Now, the next step is the harder one. As your first posting, we want to send you to the provinces. And if you say you will resign, we need you, we will not transfer you. So we're giving you the choice. We request, would you take a posting out of Nairobi? And I asked, and where would that be to? And he said, to Kisumu, we are understaffed, we need a good person. And I said, Kisumu is Kenya, why not? Everybody was happy with that. And I went off to my first posting in Kisumu and stayed there for 3 years before duty called. I was retransferred to Nairobi, and My history is on record. I was a very diligent public prosecutor at the time. I handled cases well beyond my pay grade and I did get married while I was in the state law office. I should point out, I met my beautiful and wonderful wife at the state law office. And so, Commissioner, Attorney General, I know there are good people there who are marriable, even now. But I want to say that I got married there, and I carried on. And in 1992, I finally found it a little difficult to raise a family within the terms of service at the time. And so both my wife and I left to set up private practice. So that is a significant part of a history that I would like to tell. I should also tell you that I did try and stay. I'm not a footloose civil servant. I don't pick up and go when I have a choice. I tried to work the system to recognize the work that some of us were doing, but the system wasn't like it is now. It is far more responsive now. At that time, it was expected that you would want to leave anyway after a few years. And I remember writing a long letter explaining why I left. And when I finally saw that letter many years later, the then Solicitor General had said, noted, place on file. Nobody cared. Nobody cared for good service. Nobody cared for committed service. Now, in the time I worked as a public prosecutor, as a state counsel, I worked very closely with the judiciary. I worked very closely with the resident judge in Kisumu for the 3 years I was there. In a small town, or in a smaller town, Kisumu isn't that small, the intricate workings of the public prosecution's office and that of the judge or the judiciary is such that you work together to reduce backlog, you work together long hours if necessary to handle appeals so that people stay in prison properly or have the benefit of appeals being successful. I got to understand it as no one would in the private sector. You're in public service, you're working with a judge, you're working with the judiciary staff, and it's second nature. When they can't proceed, they tell you. When you can't proceed, you tell them. So that was my experience in Kisumu. When I came to Nairobi, more or less the same, much bigger setup. It's public service, it's understanding the position of the judiciary, understanding where they have challenges and where you have challenges. In the public prosecution's duties that I had, I spent my whole time in court. I spent my whole time understanding the tribulations of my colleagues who by then, of course, were magistrates. Prosecutions are undertaken before magistrates and appeals before the then High Court and then, of course, the Court of Appeal. So when I read about the history of the judiciary and the words used in the transformation manual, I identify with it. I know what the judiciary was. I know how it was not responsive. I know how it was not people-centered. I know how it was generally seen to be, in civil matters, the preserve of those who had money. And I saw how, of course, those who didn't have money got shortchanged. I mention this because very often a state counsel defending a conviction or a position taken by the lower court would be alone against an ordinary citizen who had no counsel. And I'm not talking about those on capital convictions where there would be a pauper brief assigned to an advocate. I'm talking about a citizen against you. You know, there's no equality of arms. But as a state counsel, having the heart to sometimes defend the convict. And when I say defend, plead the case of the convict. And I'm talking about a situation where you look at a record of appeal, and somehow, despite the conviction and the sentence of several years in prison, or even the sentence of death, you can't find the evidence to support the conviction. And in the role of a state counsel, it would be your responsibility to easily and happily concede to the fact that the conviction cannot stand. So I am alive to what the judiciary was at the time. I moved then to, having resigned in 1992, I went into private practice. I set up a practice from scratch. When I say scratch, I mean scratch. A couple of desks this size, one for the secretary, very thin walls as partitions. I think I recall we borrowed a couple of 100,000 shillings and set up the office. I have all these years been able to grow that practice until it is a well-known practice. It has been fairly large. Through this practice, we have handled, mentored many, many, many students, many advocates who have worked with us and left, and kept the flag flying. In this practice, I have handled many briefs. I have represented a president of the Republic. I say this and it'll become relevant later. What am I saying? I don't belong to the category that will look at the President of the Republic as some godlike figure. I look at the President as a person who I can speak to, who can communicate. And in the case of that particular president, Daniel Arap Moi, the late, he was a good client and he took legal advice. He would ask twice, so is that your advice? But that is in passing. I go on to explain one or two other briefs that put me in contact with various other arms of government. I personally handled the famous, or infamous, the briefs that arose from the infamous Goldenberg scandal. And this was a brief that was passed to me on account of my public service experience, my diligence, my commitment, despite all the temptations that would go with such a brief. In that brief, I don't want to go into the merits of it, I came in contact with ministers, with governors of central bank, and other powerful individuals. It was a classic case where it took collaboration between agencies within government to succeed. And I must say, this in passing, when I handled those briefs, His Lordship, the late Justice Kokar, was the Chief Justice. And it was a very happy experience. Cases were handled fairly expeditiously and with a fair measure of success. I say this because, and perhaps this is something that will feature later on in the interview, the administration of a particular Chief Justice defines the output, the expectation from that judiciary. And I say this with great respect to the departed Chief Justices who I'm going to refer to. Central Bank or not had a fair measure of success in some of its cases under one administration. And when there was a change of administration, and we had a different Chief Justice after Justice Kokar, suddenly the fortunes in those cases changed. And I will say this because it's a matter of record. And certain judges who had ruled in a certain way shortly before ruled in a different way. I can only say that it is what the leadership of the time showed to the judiciary, gave you a sign about what was permissible and what was not. I don't want to say more for legal reasons, but that is the story of the Goldenberg cases through the courts in our country.
Maybe Senior Counsel,
yes,
I could pick it up from there about leadership, because you have talked about the different people and their leadership styles, and ask you, if you became CJ, what is your leadership style? Is it democratic? Is it